Good morning, Healdsburg.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to this morning's Good Morning Healdsburg. We are lucky to have with us Quinn Nichols, who's currently a Deputy District Attorney with Sonoma County District Attorney's Office. Went to the best law school ever, Santa Clara Law School, which I happen to be allowed to go to as well. So might be prejudiced somewhat. He worked for 12 years before coming here with the Santa Clara District Attorney's Office. He's currently running the Organized Retail Theft Unit, which, as everybody knows, is the hot topic for everywhere to these days. But he's been involved with a lot of them before. He's been involved with narcotics, general felony, violent felony, sexual assault, criminal street gangs, served on the human trafficking task force down in Santa Clara. But he's also probably the most electable deputy district attorney that I've met, despite the fact, I mean, in addition to the fact that he went to a great law school and a great high school, it's Carl Newman, he's a local boy. Also served at the U.S. Naval, went to the U.S. Naval Academy and served in the Marine Corps in Iraq with two tours there. So anything you'd like to add, Talia?
No, not right now. Thank you so much.
And then we're going to turn things over to you, Quinn. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate everyone being here this morning. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to speak to you. As I mentioned, Talia, just a moment ago, my investigator and I have had an opportunity to reach out to some of our local community groups. We've talked to our local law enforcement agencies, met with some chambers of commerce, and even some individual business owners and retailer groups. Had the opportunity to meet with David for a couple minutes a couple weeks ago and share a cup of coffee and talk about what we do. And just mention that I would appreciate the opportunity to just explain who we are, what our mission is basically, and exactly the types of cases we handle and how it's a change basically. The creation of the Organized Retail Theft Unit here at the Sonoma County DA's office is a relatively new thing. We've been up and running for about 3 months, give or take. It's fair to say that we started officially in July. John came on board in March, April timeframe, and I started up here in July. And since then, we've hit the ground running. We have, as I mentioned, gone around. In the first place we stopped was we talked to all of our law enforcement agencies, explained who we were, explained sort of our expectations in terms of the types of cases we would be handling, and did some basic training at the detective and patrol level to talk to them about things they could do to help us as these cases progressed forward. As I'm sure many of you know, organized retail theft, as Mark mentioned a second ago, is very much a hot topic. It's something that has increased in the past couple of years. Hard statistics are hard to come by, frankly. Different consumer groups and the California Retailers Association, they have some numbers, but there's a fair amount of variance in those numbers. Different organizations evaluate theft differently, and everyone has a different definition of theft. And so that can impact the statistics that people are putting forward. And that's something that we get asked a lot. How much has it changed year over year? Has it increased in 2024 compared to 2023? And the answer is, it just depends on the numbers you're looking at. What I can say is all those numbers do appear to be going up. We haven't found any statistics that show an overall decrease in organized retail theft or even commercial theft. But generally it does appear to be on the upswing, which is part of the reason why we're here. And so I have just a general PowerPoint that will kind of explain a bit more about who we are. So please bear with me for just one moment. I'm going to share my screen. And let's see. Hopefully everyone can see that first slide. Let me know if you cannot. So the first thing that's helpful to talk about, or I found that's helpful to talk about when we introduce ourselves, is what is this thing that we do? What is organized retail theft? What is organized retail crime? And I'm going to pull from the definition that our California Attorney General uses, that it's organized crime rings that steal property with the intent to sell or distribute the stolen merchandise. And that's really the crux of what organized retail theft is. It's the difference between stealing for consumption, i.e. someone stealing a sandwich from 7-Eleven and eating it in the parking lot, and someone's stealing 5 vacuum cleaners from Target and then putting them on eBay or putting them on Facebook Marketplace or even Amazon, and then reselling that property, usually at a very, very significant discount. To give you an idea of what we're talking about and sort of the breadth of materials that would fall under things that are commonly being stolen, we have cases that involve vacuum cleaners. We have cases that involve video game consoles. We have cases that involve some more obscure items. There's one individual that takes displays for the Super Mario Brothers from a particular retailer. And then we sort of at the other end of the spectrum, we have people that go to hardware stores and steal rolls of metal fencing, flooring, lumber, and then put those things on Facebook Marketplace for pennies on the dollar. And so almost anything that you can imagine being resold in the marketplace, be it eBay, be it Amazon, whatever, those are the types of merchandise that are being stolen by these organized retail theft groups. You may have seen there was a news story relatively recently. There was a large group in San Diego that was arrested and prosecuted. And that woman was actually running a group of younger women who were stealing products mostly from Ulta Beauty and some other like high-end healthcare companies, and then putting the individual products on Amazon. And she had an Amazon store and had made literally millions of dollars over several years as she sold these products. And so as Attorney General Bonta has mentioned, whatever form it takes, these crimes are felonies. It's not petty theft or shoplifting. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today is the cultural shift that law enforcement is in the midst of in terms of organized retail theft. As many of you are aware, several years ago, the law passed that created a felony threshold of $950, meaning that anything below that threshold could only be charged as a misdemeanor and anything above a felony. And then several years after that, there was another law that was passed that created misdemeanor diversion. And what that means is almost any misdemeanor case can be subject to court diversion, that is diversion handled by a judge. And at the end of that diversionary period, which can be as few as 2 or 3 months, the case is dismissed. And so in effect, to steal below $950 is a misdemeanor offense that is subject to diversion, which means that if somebody does a couple community service hours or something similar, that case goes away entirely. That is something that the law is currently trying to change, and that's something that we in law enforcement and at the DA's office are focused on changing that mindset, convincing not just, letting the public know that we're doing this and that we're taking it very seriously, but also communicating to the criminal element that this is not something that's going to be tolerated, that this is something that we're going to take a very aggressive stance on, and that Sonoma County is not a good place for them to do this. So from this definition, the state started taking action, and they did a number of things. And in 2021, they passed a new criminal statute that created organized retail theft as a crime. And I'll talk about what that is in a little bit more detail in a moment. But again, generally, the basic tenets to know is it involves more than one person, and it involves stealing for the purpose of resale. There's a couple different ways a person can violate that crime. But when they created that new statute in 2021, Sacramento started working on ways in which they could support implementation and active prosecution under that new statute. And they came up with the Board of State and Community Corrections grant program for organized retail theft. And so what that grant program is, as I mentioned in the slide, it is money from the state given to law enforcement agencies, given to DA's offices, with the purpose of facilitating their prosecution of this crime. And it's focused on the idea of vertical prosecution, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But what that generally means is, rather than cases coming into an office and being assigned to a random prosecutor, there is one prosecutor or several prosecutors that are dedicated to the crime. And any one of these cases gets routed directly to that person or to that group of people. In our office, our unit is 2 people. It's John Kempf, my investigator, and myself. So that means that any ORT case in Sonoma County that comes in lands on my desk. So I mentioned in 2021, a new law was passed. That was Penal Code Section 490.4. It was the first time Sacramento actually defined a crime of organized retail theft. And a lot of the cases that I deal with are under that statute. But the other elements or parts of the law, I guess I should say, where I spend most of my time are these other 3 laws that I mentioned: grand theft, which the law defines as anything above $950. Commercial burglary, which is people going into retail stores with the intent to steal. And then criminal conspiracy, because as I mentioned, organized retail theft under the law as it stands right now has to involve more than one person. So it's multiple people going into a retailer to take merchandise with the intent to put that back on the market and sell it. So a couple questions that come up about organized retail theft. One of the biggest challenges of when we prosecute, when agencies investigate these groups and when we prosecute them, is being able to identify who they are. And it's often that we might be able to identify one member of a group or 2 members of a group, but not all of it. Sacramento did account for that when they passed this new law in 2021. And they added a section that does not require that we actually be able to identify everyone that's involved. And so a circumstance where this comes up frequently is a getaway driver. So a person may come into, say, Home Depot, grab a bunch of power tools, walk right out the front door, and get into the passenger side of a car and drive away. Well, we know that someone else is helping them. We know that someone else was involved, but we have no way of identifying who they are. Before this law, we would not be able to charge any type of organized crime because we didn't know who that second person was. With the passage of 490.4, Sacramento has given us the tool to do just that. So another question that we get, I mentioned earlier, is again about this $950 threshold. How does that work? And is it a hard limitation? Does it mean that absolutely nothing happens if it's below that? Well, the answer, typical lawyer answer, is it depends. So what does it depend on? Well, Sacramento gave us in the 490.4 statute, if a person does it more than once and the total value that they steal is more than $950, then we can charge a felony. So it is not uncommon that we have some suspects and eventually defendants who are very well aware of the $950 threshold, and they will intentionally steal less than that amount, sometimes $945, with the idea that there's no way they can be charged with a felony. Under this law and under the prosecutions that we're bringing forth right now, that's no longer the case. And that's something that we're aggressively pushing once we identify a person has done something more than once. And I'll talk about sort of what that process looks like when a case comes in. We actively try to find a way to prosecute it as a felony if they've done it more than once. Our goal is to get a holistic capture of what an individual suspect or defendant is doing, because that's really what organized retail theft is. Organized retail theft defendants are not generally suspects and defendants that do something once. They usually do something multiple times in multiple places and multiple jurisdictions. And so what we try to do is capture that as one snapshot in a criminal case, as opposed to a bunch of smaller misdemeanor cases. So one of the other tools we have to do that is under grand theft, under grand theft, we have the ability to do that, but there's an extra caveat. And so what that is if a suspect goes in and commits a series of thefts that are all individually under $950, but generally it's basically the same plan, they're executing the same thing, we have the ability to charge those separate events as one felony event. And so let me give you an example of how that might come into play. A real world example would be, we had a defendant where his MO was to load up a grocery cart of stuff or a shopping cart, excuse me, and push it out a fire exit. Every single time he went into a retailer, he did the exact same thing. He loaded up a shopping cart and pushed it out a fire exit. So what we can do from that, and what we ended up doing in that case, is the individual thefts were less than $950. Sometimes they were as low as $100, $300, $500, $600. But because he had the exact same plan and did the exact same thing every time he went into a retailer and committed this theft, we were able to charge it all as one theft, or actually as a series of thefts, felony thefts, I should say. And so under grand theft, the law gives us that opportunity to do that. So those are the code sections we work with. Now, who we are is, I mentioned we have a dedicated ORT prosecutor. That's something that Grant is designed to facilitate, and that's me. We have a dedicated ORT investigator. That's John Kempf. He was a sergeant at Roanoke Park PD before the DA's office hired him over. He has literally decades of law enforcement experience, and the two of us together work these cases day in and day out. That being said, these cases are collaborative and involve pulling information, sharing information, I should say, excuse me, and working with other agencies, retailers. We actually have a monthly meeting that we just had just yesterday. That's all the county property crime investigators from the respective police departments, as well as those senior people from most of the retailers, the senior loss prevention people from Target, from Walmart, from CVS, from Walgreens. We get them together in a room and we have them network and talk to each other about trends they're dealing with from the retailer standpoint, investigative techniques that have been effective from the law enforcement standpoint, and just passing information back and forth has been very productive in terms of identifying these suspects and prosecuting the cases. So you can see on the slide, we actually have memorandums of understanding with basically every law enforcement agency in the county. And that's something we did on the front end because we wanted to let them know who we were and what we were doing, and just basically get their buy-in. Let them know, like, hey, when we call you and tell you that we're working one of these cases, we don't want it to be a surprise. We want you to know that we're here, that we're doing this, and whatever you can provide in terms of resources and assistance, we welcome. And it also, particularly with some of the smaller agencies, it's been very helpful because, frankly, a lot of these agencies don't have very many detectives. They're very understaffed and they don't have the ability to marshal that many resources. And we, as a county office, we just have access to greater resources. And we frequently are able to assist them in investigations to try to get the case to filing. So what we focus on, that's our structure. What we focus on, I mentioned just a second ago, kind of touched on it. Primarily, we do a lot of information sharing. Our monthly meeting, we push information back and forth. I'll talk about the life cycle of a case and what that looks like in terms of how we share information. Joint investigations. As I mentioned, these defendants, these suspects, generally do not respect jurisdictional boundaries. They commit thefts in multiple jurisdictions, at multiple retailers, often in the same day. And so that involves pulling in different retailers, different agencies. Evidence collection and preservation. That's one of the areas where, for instance, that might be talking to retailers about actually reporting the crime. Make sure you file an online report. Make sure you save the video surveillance and providing that information to law enforcement in a way they can do it. The legal strategies and case management kind of touches on something I mentioned in terms of capturing a holistic image of these defendants. We don't want to charge 5 misdemeanors when in fact we have 1 or 2 felonies. And then community outreach and public awareness is exactly this, just letting the community know that we're doing this and that we're trying to turn the ship around, that we're trying to communicate to the criminal element that Sonoma County is not the place to commit this type of crime and that you will be aggressively prosecuted. So one of the last things I want to touch on is just sort of, so what does this mean in practical effect? Like, how does this work? Well, this is the life cycle of a general organized retail theft case as it comes in. And one of the things that I just generally try to highlight is this is a little different from normally how cases are referred to the DA's office and filed, because there's an extra step. And what that extra step is normally police officers, someone reports a crime, victim, witness, police officers write up their reports, send it to the DA's office. We review those reports and we file charges based on what's in those reports. The additional step that John and I have added is before we file that case, what we're doing, unless we have some time sensitivity to it, i.e. the defendant is in jail, we push the information back out to retailers. So how would that work? Well, let's say Walgreens sends us a report for a single instance of theft that happened last Tuesday, and they have the person identified, they have the merchandise that they stole, and maybe a vehicle that was associated with them. So what we would do, rather than immediately filing that one misdemeanor offense, is we take those identifying features, the vehicle, the person involved, the merchandise that was stolen, and we push it back out to our retailer community. Target, Home Depot, Walmart, individual small businesses, anyone that basically we have direct lines of communication with. And we ask them if this person is known to them. Have they had similar thefts? Have they had this particular person commit thefts before at any of their locations? Have they had the vehicle involved in any thefts? Because then we start to pull the thread. And then we find out what initially was one misdemeanor offense is actually 4 or 5 misdemeanor offenses, or maybe several felony offenses. And again, that gets us to that holistic picture of what this person is actually doing, or this group of people, as it often is. And at that point, we're able to file what I would describe as more accurate charges that capture the criminal conduct of an individual or a group. And then we prosecute that case. And we've had a number of cases that have actually already adjudicated, with a number of defendants that have either pled guilty. Well, actually, I haven't taken one to trial yet. I haven't had that yet. But I've had a number of defendants that have pled guilty to exactly that statute I mentioned, Penal Code Section 490.4, organized retail theft. So I know I talk really fast, and I know I just went through a lot, so I apologize. This is us, as I mentioned. I'm the dedicated prosecutor for the team, and John Kempf is my investigator. The two of us spend a lot of time together, and this is all we do. So we're happy to answer, or I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. We got anybody out there with a question? David?
Quinn, thank you for doing the presentation. One of the things you mentioned when we met was the QR code and how that process works. Can you talk about that a little bit from the individual small retailer? Because, you know, we don't have a whole lot of Walmarts and Targets in Healdsburg. So something a little bit more Healdsburg specific, and how we can help our retailers and businesses here.
Absolutely. And if you give me just one moment, I'm actually going to see if I can pull it up. And that way I can share it. Let's see if I can do this. Is that visible to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, one moment. That's actually just 1 second. That is not our final version. Here we go. So part of our community outreach was focused on the idea of putting something tangible out. And I'm sorry, that's visible, correct? Everyone can see that?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So this flyer is something we created when we first started, with the idea being that it can be distributed to individual businesses. It's not limited to anyone. It can go as far and wide as anyone would like it to. We have distributed it to a couple of small businesses, some of the larger retailers. We have electronic and hard copies. And so basically what it is designed to make the process of reporting organized retail theft as easy as possible. And so at the bottom of this flyer, you see a QR code that says click here to report organized retail theft. If you scan that QR code, you have an option of selecting multiple different languages to report in, and it creates a very basic fillable form. And that form is sort of the 5 W's, where you were, what you saw, general description, the date, time, contact information. That generates an email that auto-populates for John and I. It comes directly to the two of us in our organized retail theft inbox. And then what we do with that information is we use it sort of as like a flagging system. We then are able to turn that report around and direct it to the respective law enforcement agency so that they can begin their investigation. And that might immediately result in a police officer coming out. It might involve just a contact and sort of getting the evidence together and getting more information about what happened. But again, we want to make it as easy as possible for these crimes to be reported. Generally speaking, the feedback we've gotten from retailers and retailer groups is that it is underreported, that often retailers will tell us, well, we don't think the cops are going to come. We don't think anybody's going to do anything about it. We think it's just going to be a misdemeanor. And these are all the notions that we're trying to change. And so this flyer is something that, and I'm happy to email it out or provide hard copies to anyone who would like one. The idea is designed that if you want, you can put it in the window of your business to act as a deterrent to any potential thieves. You can just make it available to your employees. However you choose to use it, entirely up to you. But we want to streamline the process so that anyone who sees or is aware of organized retail theft or anything similar can report it as quickly as possible. Thank you for the question, David.
Quinn, this is Talia, and I would love it if we could have a stack of these that we could
Of
hand out
course.
to retailers, or even possibly just this picture, and then have them know that they can come pick one up.
Yes, I'd be happy to provide hard copies, and I can email you electronic copies as well, if that's easier. Some of the retailers have said that they would just like an electronic one, or they want to print their own, but I'm happy to provide whatever you need.
Okay, and as a follow-up question to that, and I'm sorry if someone had their hand raised, I couldn't see, but I was just curious. So the $9.50 per person, is that like, how do you figure that out? Does that include the full, like, is it taxes? Is it just $9.50 per item? I mean, per total?
Very good question. It is
I'm headed over to
$9.50.
CVS and I don't want Jeff K to come after me, so.
It is not $9.50 per person. So
Okay,
it's
okay.
it's $9.50 basically per theft.
For theft,
And it
got it.
does something that a lot of our defendants are not aware of, is it does actually include tax. The tax
interesting.
amount on the merchandise that is stolen is something that can go towards that 950 or more. Well, technically it has to be more than 950, so 951 or 950 and a penny.
Yeah.
So that amount can be aggregated based on all those things.
Okay, but the organized theft, the organized retail crime is mostly what the focus is on, correct?
The focus of the unit,
Yes.
that's our charge, if you will. That's our mission.
Mhm.
And largely that's because we do have some parameters of the grant in terms of what we can handle. But also a good question, and I appreciate that, because technically we are allowed to, our grant covers anything under Chapter 5 of the Penal Code, which no reason anybody needs to know that. But basically, it's almost all theft offenses, up to but not including embezzlement. So grand theft, petty theft, burglary, shoplifting, obviously organized retail theft. I'm trying to think of other general theft offenses that come up, but that's all I can think of right now. But generally speaking, what it means is almost any theft offense in Sonoma County, we have the ability to prosecute under our unit. That would also include robbery, which is something we have had a few actual robbery cases, which is theft involving force or fear, that are under our purview as well, because those defendants have been involved in robberies as well as grand thefts. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, is it a car, so like car theft as well, like any kind of theft?
Another very good question. So car theft, technically the grant allows us to deal with car theft, but we actually have a separate unit in the DA's office that only does car theft. And so they are in charge of all that.
And now the 950, if they did multiple thefts, you can add them together to get to the 950, or no?
Exactly. So there's a couple different ways to do that. The grand theft is not time limited, meaning that it doesn't have to be within a particular calendar window. It just has to be in the statute, basically in the period of time that we're working with, which is 3 years, is statute of limitations. The organized retail theft is a 12-month calendar window. So it's 2 or more instances in a 12-month window. We can aggregate those amounts.
Yeah, because I think before that statute, you're right, there was, that is there a movement to change the 950 or to move it back down?
It's not a movement specific to the 950, but it is a movement related to Governor Newsom just signed some legislation that sort of worked around it. And then Prop 36, if that passes, talks about it as well. None of those laws that Newsom just signed are in effect until next year. But one of the things we would have the advantage to do is currently that aggregation of amount, it's limited to your jurisdiction. So I should say, we're only able to aggregate within Sonoma County. And one of the changes of the law that's coming down the pike is we can aggregate based on other jurisdictions. So if someone stole in Napa County and Sonoma County, and we're trying to aggregate to get above the 950 amount, if we get permission from Napa County, DA's office to DA's office, then we can add that to our amount and then prosecute it as a felony.
Yeah, I think adding that aggregation and then having to go across jurisdictions is really helpful. I know that I've had clients that were, victimized by somebody, and when they went and saw them, that they realized that they had done it to other people.
Yeah.
And everything was under the 950 limit. And so they were,
Yes.
at that point being just prosecuted as a misdemeanor or not prosecuted at all in some
Yeah.
cases. And it was very disheartening, but with the ability that you have now that they built in, sounds like we're on the right direction.
It does seem to be trending in the right direction. And one of the things that I would say, David, you mentioned that Healdsburg doesn't have big box retailers. It's mostly smaller retailers. One of the things, John and I had an opportunity to speak to some smaller retailers in Sonoma recently, and that was some feedback we got from them as well. Hey, we're small mom and pop shops, we're smaller businesses. Like, how does this apply to us? And one of the things just really want to reinforce is it is very uncommon that the individuals that commit this type of crime do it in one place or do it once. It is really the exception. I honestly can't think of a case that I have seen that involves that. The majority of our defendants are hitting multiple stores in multiple jurisdictions multiple times. And so from that, as it relates to small retailers, I would just encourage any small retailer to make that report, to file an online report, to call police, to let law enforcement know about it. Because if they're hitting you, they're probably hitting somebody else. And then we can start to put that whole capture together and figure out how to stop them from doing that.
So on that note, Quinn, I have a question. The retailers always contact the chamber if they have someone on camera that has stolen something. I obviously don't feel comfortable sending that out because I have no idea whether that person did or not. But so I guess my question is, what can we do to help the retailers in town, and what's the best information to give them should something like that happen? Because I think what they're trying to do is, obviously they care about the other retailers around them, and they know they possibly are going to go to the next store and steal something. But we have put out alerts before. I don't put out the video, but those are the kinds of things. They'll take screenshots and they want us to send this person, and obviously I don't want to falsely accuse anyone of anything. So what would you recommend that we tell the retailers to do to get the quickest response? And is that just going to, we've told them obviously call the local police, but anything you recommend?
I think that would be a circumstance where I would highly encourage that retailer to use our QR code. That's precisely what it's for, in terms of we want to provide a mechanism that gets the fastest response. And a retailer that experiences a theft and just isn't really sure what to do with that information, that's one of the quickest ways to get that response. Even if it means that it then requires the DA's office to sort of prompt a law enforcement agency, obviously the Healdsburg Police Department, to go out and talk to them. It just sort of opens up the opportunities, because at that point, once it's in our system, we're aware of it and we can figure out what the next step is. In addition to using the QR code, the other thing that I would highly recommend is filing an online police report. That generally is the most effective way to document it at the time. I know a frequent complaint that we hear from retailers is, well, I file an online report and then I never hear anything else about it. And that's something we're working on in terms of interacting with the agencies and figuring out the best way to sort of collate those online reports to figure out similarities, to identify similarities and try to figure out patterns. But it also creates that documentation, that statistic, if you will, for the Healdsburg Police Department that gets it in their system and gets the ball rolling. one of the things that we want to encourage is if retailers are not seeing adequate response time, or basically they have questions about something that they have filed an online report about, or they've contacted the DA's office via the QR code, that's something we want to hear about, because we're trying to shorten that time frame. We're trying to get a quicker response time in terms of letting a retailer know, or even a law enforcement agency, hey, this is what's going on with your case. Yeah, you sent us this email, you filed this online report. This is what we did with it. And this is what you can expect in terms of timing. I will say this, every law enforcement agency we've talked to in the county is entirely on board with this. Generally, when we've talked to law enforcement agencies, they've said, finally, thankfully, like, we're going to actually get back to aggressively prosecuting property crimes. We're on board. What can we do to help? How can we assist? And so from that, what I anticipate is, once reports are made to law enforcement, once law enforcement is aware of a situation, they're going to respond aggressively.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, does anybody else have any questions? Because we're running out of time on that. If not, I want you to know that if you see Dave Hagley's picture, Quinn, he's just in there shopping. He looks.
I will keep that in mind.
Yeah.
You're safe with me.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Quinn. That was really helpful. It is a really hot topic, is very important to everybody, and I know it's a harder one because the property crimes are usually on the lower end of the scale, but it's so important these days, just in the aggregate, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for everyone's time this morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you. And if you have any questions or any follow-up concerns, please don't hesitate to contact us.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing before Quinn leaves? I think it's important to remember the last couple of years of what we've been through, whether it's the fires or the pandemic. During the pandemic, it was about communication on the updates from the health department and the guidelines that were constantly changing to really kind of work together with the local retailers and businesses to understand what the rules were. And then we also, about a year and a half ago, had, if you recall, there's some meetings about homelessness where, one business would be, bringing out leftovers for somebody because they felt bad. And then the business next door is complaining about homeless sleeping in the doorway. And it's really important for the business community to kind of get on the same page and understand that they're, working together. This can be really effective. And that's where I see the real possibility on this, where you don't have one small business, whether it's a 7-Eleven or any other business, that's just dejected because, like, oh, why even bother? And I think this kind of gives that power to the entire business community. So hopefully, we can keep this conversation going and maybe have Quinn back, just speaking directly to the retailers, or, some other format through the chamber. That'd be great.
All right.
Just let me know when you'd like to do it, and I'll make myself available. Thank you for that, Dave.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Quinn. Well, good segue right over to you, David, for an update from City Council.
All right, I'll just do a short one in September. The big one that was really exciting is we approved the design and engineering for 3 aquifer storage and recovery wells. So council continues. I mean, we have not taken our foot off the gas when or the electric car power, whatever it's called, when it comes to keeping that focus on water resiliency. So that's a really, really big deal. We got FEMA grant money. If everything goes well and we go through all the approvals and get everything done, we're looking at that could provide up to 60 million gallons during an irrigation season. So that's a lot just for that. And you combine that with, the drinking water that's being replaced for irrigation for Purple Pipe. I mean, there's a lot that we're doing, and there's a lot more coming down that line. But I do want to, I keep bringing that up because it's a big deal. On our meeting on Monday, we had the second reading for the creation of the Arts and Culture Commission. This is something that was part of our goals. We had the discussions and we fine-tuned it. So that is being approved. And then I think once that approval is done, we'll go out for people can apply to serve on that. And I think, it's good to have a diverse set of community members, because, when you say art is in the eye of the beholder, we want a bunch of different beholders that are looking at things to get different perspectives. And then we're going to be getting an update on the emergency operations plan. It's always good to update these things in the context of today. And then finally, we're getting a presentation on the draft Healdsburg Active Transportation Plan as well. So some presentations and things like that, but it's always valuable to tune in. And if you missed the council meeting, make sure you sign up for the city manager update, because Jeff is usually pretty good at covering a lot of the stuff that we have done and then what's coming up down the road. And then finally, we have a ballot measure, Measure O, that the city council put on the ballot. For information on that, go to the City of Healdsburg's website. They have a frequently asked questions section that's constantly updated. There's a lot of good information on there. So I'll just leave it at that and turn it over to Jeff, I guess, if he had anything to say.
Thanks, Mayor. I actually don't have too much to add today. On the presentation we just heard, yeah, I think that's great information. I'll just, I think everybody saw there's a headline that we arrested 2 people last week. It's tempting to say we don't have this happening in Healdsburg, and I think we don't relative to a lot of our neighbors. Well, surely we do, but we're in a much better position. But we arrested 2 people, and it was not lost on me when I saw the announcement last week that the estimated value of the items taken was about 1,000. And I guess that'll be adjudicated through the process, but they might have made a math error. And there were some other violations once these folks were picked up, so there'll be some other issues. But it's rare here, but certainly not unheard of, and we're not immune to what's happening around the area. So glad to have the chamber facilitate that conversation, and hopefully the retailers know that the county and the chamber and the city are all here to be partners in helping if we do have issues. Mayor mentioned this, we have a couple of big capital projects that are cruising along. I'll also note that we're nearing the home stretch actually on that recycled water project. If you see patch paving out there, please know that that's patch paving. They tend to kind of make a mess and throw a little asphalt down, and then we go and clean it up once the project is done, rather than lots of little paving contracts. So the streets will get a little better, but I know driving on those bumps on University, every time I have a bumpy ride, I'm reminded that we had a great grant-funded recycled water project came before. So hopefully you all feel that same joy when the road's a little rough. But the project's cruising. The fire substation is cruising along without issue, should be done at the end of the year. The Foley Pavilion we keep doing all the soils monitoring. We found a couple interesting things in the soil, but nothing that triggered an environmental review or a stop of the project. So that project's moving along pretty well too. So we're getting a lot of stuff done out there. Obviously it's election season. I'll just build on what the mayor said a little bit. 34 days, if anybody's counting. I don't have a whole lot to add as far as some people are counting as the council race, but you heard and that Measure O is on the ballot, and we know that housing is charged, emotional, and complicated. We take seriously the city's obligation to provide factual, non-biased information when something is on the ballot. I know that's been kind of a conversation topic in some circles. But we're trying to do exactly that, which is just provide information. There's a campaign in favor, there's a campaign opposed. They're going to do what they're going to do, and that's fine. But you may have all received, we sent out about 3,500 emails to registered voters who have provided their email address. I'm not one of them, but lots of people are, because we sent a few thousand of them last week, with links to the FAQ that the mayor mentioned, and just this map, right? If we're talking about a geographic exclusion to our growth management ordinance, where is it? Is a very appropriate question. We're trying to get that map out everywhere so people know what they're voting on. We will have a mailer going out in probably 2 weeks. Same idea. It'll be a little bit more general information about what's on the ballot, how to vote, where to vote, but we understand this item is hard for people who don't spend all of their Monday nights with us talking about housing for 4 hours at a time. So we're really trying to get that information out. And I want to emphasize again, we take very seriously our obligation out of City Hall to provide factual information, not advocacy. So hopefully that's what you'll see. But it is, in spite of some of the concerns around that topic, we still feel like it's important to put that information out. So if you're a voter in town, keep an eye on your mailbox. It won't be the only election related piece of mail you get in the next several weeks, if I had to guess, but there will be one coming from the city.
Yeah, I've received that. I thought it was good. Showing the areas in particular on the map because I get questions about that myself. I got a question about, there's a couple signs I saw that said something about reducing your water bills. I said, not on the statute I saw, but I guess maybe I could have missed something there.
I can respond to that or ignore that if you,
We can talk later.
you got it.
But I thought that the email was good. I thought the map was great. It does explain a lot of things because I think people just wanted to know where it was going to be. And, me telling them somewhere along Healdsburg Avenue wasn't cutting it for them. So, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and if people have feedback, that stuff is always changing. The beauty of an online FAQ is that we can update it when we get better information or understand the concerns differently. So please, if any of you are hearing things and you think we're kind of missing a note or missing information, I would definitely welcome send me an email.
Yeah, I think the people I've spoken to, I'm for Measure O, so, I'm prejudiced that way, but I've been involved in this subject for a number of years now since we've had the growth management ordinance, and we've struggled with things. And I don't think people realize that, you try to put up an apartment building, every one of those doors is another house, essentially, under the growth management ordinance. And so we just haven't had any apartment buildings because of that. And this would rectify that. It's a little bit like what, the state's doing with the $950 limit on crimes. That created a lot of issues, and this is trying to bring it back so that we can resolve those. And I think it's a really well thought out option. All right. Anything else, Jeff?
Perfect.
All right. Chris, you have anything you want to add?
Amanda has a couple of announcements before we end, but they're just brief.
Okay. Nothing for you, Chris? I'm seeing you shake your head. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you, Mark.
Okay,
Appreciate
great.
that.
Okay, announcements?
The Chamber's got a couple of really fun events coming up. We have our Fall Women in Business coming up, coffee chat. It's going to be at the Villa Chanticleer. It's on Friday, November 1st. We have an amazing keynote speaker coming down from the Bay Area. She's been to Healdsburg several times. She's a huge fan of Healdsburg. She's going to do some different reels and social posts and different things for us. But her name is Nicole, otherwise known as Kale Junkie. She just wrote a cookbook. It's for sale in both of our bookstores. She's going to bring that as well. So looking forward to that. Tickets are on sale. You can find them on our website, on the events calendar. And then our Sip and Shop is back, and December 7th is the date for that, Saturday, December 7th. So we're looking for downtown retailers, wineries, the tasting rooms, even if people don't have a brick and mortar and they want to set something up to get their brand out there or get more known about, the Sip and Shop is a great opportunity for them to be a part. That's also on our calendar. Went out to the members in our newsletter this past week, and we'll continue to promote it as well. But food vendors, all of it, just spread the word about that. They can contact me, and we'll pair them up with someone fun, downtown retailer, to do the annual Sip and Shop that everyone loves. So those are our two big holiday events coming up. Thank you.
Let me just add in for the Sip and Shop. This is a really great opportunity if you know people that don't have brick and mortar downtown and they want to be downtown and have a presence that evening. Is the whole purpose is pairing either a winery or a food vendor with someone downtown that's a member, or a downtown retailer with someone, or someone who sells maybe goods or items that doesn't have a storefront, to be part of our shopping for the Sip and Shop. And then also don't forget about Mary Healdsburg on December 6th with Tree is Ordered. We're all super excited. So can't wait for that. When Amanda mentioned Kale Junkie, I know many of you might not be or follow on Instagram, but she has about 2 million followers, and it is a huge deal. I'm sure if some of you asked your kids or wives or girlfriends or partners, they fangirl over her. So we definitely think we will sell out on this event. So I really encourage you to attend. She was actually it's not about Kale. She was actually a lawyer and decided to kind of get out of that lifestyle and focus on health and wellness. So it's more about health and wellness in the business and workplace.
All right.
I'd like to hop in really quick too about just the holidays and a couple of events that both Talia and Amanda had mentioned, but in general, we're really excited to be launching our Season to Sparkle holiday campaign in Healdsburg. So November 15th through December 31st, something happening every day with the holidays. You can go to aseasontosparkle.com and be able to check out everything that's going on. We're really trying to make a big splash this year. We also, which it's not official until noon today, so we'll keep it here until then, but we were also named the #3 best Christmas town in the United States. So really excited to promote that and have that lead into our Season to Sparkle. So hope to see you all around town during this holiday time.
Okay, great. Anybody else have anything? If not, on behalf of Talia and the chamber, I'd like to thank you all for coming. And I know Quinn's gone, but thanks Quinn again for, his presentation. That was very insightful and helpful, I think, on that process.
Hey, Mark Wilseppi here.
Yep.
Real quick, if we have a minute. I don't think it was mentioned, Talia, that Tuesday night, the Chamber's hosting a forum on Measure O.
Oh, thank you. I apologize. Yes.
I think that is 5:30 opening over at Craftwork. And I am on that Measure O, Yes on O committee, and I will advocate for it. I know the city cannot, but since this is a chamber call, I will speak up on that. We'll also be sending out some more information on that, but super important thing for our community and really representing opportunity and a need for town and supporting all of our small businesses. So get out there, spread the word. Hopefully we'll network it and get people to support Measure O. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. We also sent out an email and we'll be sending out another one, and there will be a walk on Saturday if people want to help walk precincts and talk about Measure O.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. If you have anything, make sure you let Talia know, and if you have a keynote speaker that you'd like to hear from, I'm sure we'd be happy to work with them.
Our next speaker will be Kaushik and potentially his boss, who some of you met on the Business Outreach Walk, but she is the new CAO of the hospital locally. So we'll send out information on that.
Yeah, he's on the foundation there. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.